So our culture is definitely a Christian culture.
That's religious, Christina, but not necessarily Christian. Let's take, you know,
that's part of our identity.
You know, the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, the Lord God made them high and lowly, each to his estate. It was an endorsement of medieval feudalism. It was an endorsement of, you know, keeping inequality as it is.
But that's not
Christian, that's religious.
But that's not God-given. Yes, that was written by a Victorian lady, and it was an expression of her values.
It was an expression of religious values, but I would say not Christian values. And we need to make a huge distinction between the two, because the two are not the same.
But Jonathan, I think that, as I said, we have a culture that is Christian, and it comes in. What completely confounded Richard Dawkins was that he thought we were textbook Christians. You know, that we knew which was the first book in the Bible. We knew what the first 5 books of the Old Testament were called. No, that's not the kind of Christians we are. We are everyday Christians. It informs our every life, and it means that we do believe in charity, and we do believe in helping others, and we do believe in turning the other cheek much, much more than if we were a totally secularist culture.
Richard?
I didn't think anything. I asked Ipsos Mori to find out. Research is not preconception.
Yeah, Andrew.
I mean, actually,
actually,
that's not what the research shows at all. It doesn't show that people live their lives as if Christianity is the cultural wallpaper. It shows quite the opposite. It shows that although they tick Christian as a sort of cultural box, and the most commonly given reason in the survey was because their parents were religious or because they were Christians, so it's a sort of heritage attachment. Actually, Christianity forms very little of the common sense of their lives.
Well, can I put it to David? Call in a second.
Most people, for example.
Can I put the David Cameron quote to you, because then you can run with this, if I may. The Prime Minister, he said recently, he described Britain just as that, a Christian country. And he said, the Bible has helped give Britain a sense of values that has made Britain what it is today. What do you think of that statement?
Well, I think that Christianity has contributed to the formation of culture in this country, but it's not the only factor that has contributed. It depends when you start the story. Of course, if you start the story at when this country became Christian, Christianity lies at the beginning. If you started earlier, you're with the Romans and Greeks. If you start it later, you're with the secular Enlightenment. So it's artificial and arbitrary to some extent where you start the story. Lots of influences have shaped us. But I think the more interesting question is actually why politicians are suddenly seeming to be breaking out all over saying that we're a Christian country. And I think that's the real question, when it's so self-evidently not the case. And unfortunately...
Self-evidently not the case?
Self-evidently is the case.
Is it self-evidently?
Yes, it is. I think that, let's bring the historical perspective in. We are at the end of a period of something like 500 years in which a kind of Christianity, a kind of British state Christianity, has informed who we are. Our laws, our language, our literature, our habits, our customs, our superstitions. That period, because of the way that the church and the state of the crown are pulling apart, and because of the way that our population is changing, is coming to an end. And so people are asking, well, what does it mean? What do we do? Do we throw that away? Do we keep it? Is there something about that that we can have and keep going with?
It's a mere speck in the span of time, isn't it?
Well, of course, but we're asking at the moment, is this country that we're living in informed by Christianity? Yeah. Does it have a residual... The Archbishop of Canterbury said we were haunted by Christianity, which I think is a good way of putting it. The question is where we go from here.
But once it's lost its sort of grip on the minds and hearts of people in the country generally, I don't think that we should be resorting...
It's lost its institutional grip, but it hasn't lost its grip on the hearts of minds.
It's totally lost its grip. Most people,
not according to Richard's own survey.
According specifically,
yes, no, not according to your survey, Richard, 54% of the country still care enough to say I'm a Christian.
But when you ask them what they believe, it turns out that it hasn't got a grip on them.
It's neither my place nor yours to confront what they believe. 54% of the people, by your 1,000-person poll, which set out to prove that there were fewer Christians in the country than you thought there were.
It did not set out to do that.
Of course you did. 54% of the country still cares enough to put down Christian.
They care enough to put down Christian, but when you ask them what they actually believe, it turns out that it does not have a very large part, or hardly any part at all in many cases, in their
Good, and I'm happy to live in a country where the Christianity is ambiguous and generous and allows for other faiths, and where God is worshipped and respected.
So is he. Oh my goodness me, I'm panicking. We've had an outbreak of consensus. We can't be having any of that.
Cole makes a really important point, and that's that we've got to move beyond this polarisation and actually say what do we want to hang on to, and what do we want to make new.
Okay,
I think that's the important question.
Sorry, Jonathan, lady back there, let's hear from you. Is this a Christian country?
Well, my personal belief is that this country is built on Christian values, and I think it's a very, very beautiful aspect of this country. I am a Muslim myself, and there's something I value about this country. But I don't think that people are necessarily Christian in terms of the technical details of that faith. I think they have a general awareness or a belief in God.
Mm-hmm. And over here, was there anyone? Yeah. Yes, what would you like to say? Good morning to you.
Good morning. I think we're talking, well, both sides really are talking Christianity in an incredibly practical way. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we're actually addressing the fact that we have a very moral country. And I think, especially the politicians at the minute, the Tories are using this as a, in light of the riots and things like that, as a sort of moral guidance that they want us to follow. But although I don't like the Tories, I do think that our country isn't Christian in a practical way. The Queen is our head of state, she's head of the Church of England, but realistically it's the government that leads us. We don't attend church, but I think people do still hold those values. Then again, I think most religions offer those values. I think it's very much geographical, actually. I think that the Far East is incredibly moral, and that's, whether that's because of Islam or whatever other religion. Okay. I think it's not as practical as we're talking here.
Well, loads of interesting questions there, but thank you for that. The whole idea, though, of this sort of slightly vague and some say wishy-washy, but some say comfortable and gentle form of Christianity, and tolerant, as Christina says we have in this country. If you look, I mean, Richard or Andrew, to address this, if you look to France, which is Richard's passed you the baton, which is, avowedly secular, and arguably, as a result, perhaps, of that even, has some pretty illiberal laws, banning of the burqa, religious symbols, and so forth.
Secularism. Those are very
would that not be a danger?
Well, I think that you can over-egg the extent to which Anglicanism really has led to tolerance, and it was a very hard, ride, and it burnt itself out with literally burnt other people, but it sort of burnt itself out with persecution over the centuries, and then eventually arrived at a sort of tolerant settlement. But I think that there are many other factors in this country that have led to that tolerant feeling. A sort of a long centuries without any particular civil war or internal conflict, relative prosperity of their economic factors.
Well, we've had civil war in these islands in the last 30 years.
Oh, well, OK, that's true. OK, so let's say England and Wales. And Britain, partly inspired by religion. Well, no, because your question was about the Anglican Church, which is only established in...
It was on Christianity in these islands, kind of,
Well, there are many Christians in France as well, so that can't really be the dividing factor, and indeed the French state funds various Catholic groups even because of its secularism. My argument would be that, yes, this is a very tolerant country, and that's very much to be welcomed, but I think that the sort of things that the establishment of the Church of England and the artificially inflated Christian figure preserves are far from tolerant. That 72% figure, for example, has been used to justify not just existing state-funded faith schools that discriminate, but an expansion of them. And it's at the hard edge of political debate that figure is used to actually inflict damage on other people, and that's the problem, and that's why the survey is important, because it shows that those people who are in that 72% or whatever it turns out to be...
They're very popular. A lot of people want to send their children to them. There's some of the specifics...
Well, not the academically failing.
They
only want to send their children.
But I just add, I would not ban the burqa. That is illiberal.
Some of the specific questions on theology are interesting as well. I'll come to you in a minute, Dr. Catney, but I'm interested in this one. Rowan Williams quite recently said, you don't have to believe in the virgin birth to be a Christian. No. Do you believe in it?
Do I believe in it?
Yeah.
Well, literally, not necessarily.
Well, what does that mean, literally, not necessarily?
Well, you're identifying me as a Christian, which is interesting.
Did a virgin give birth 2,000 years ago to Jesus Christ? Was she a virgin?
I don't know, Nicky. I know that the Bible...
Does it matter?
Does it matter to me personally in terms of
the faith that I might have?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I think we are making an interesting move on the basis of what Andrew and Richard were just saying. This week we've had a comment from the Queen, who's made a shift and has started to talk about the Church of England acting as a kind of broker, using its influence on the state, those things that are left of its influence in official circles, to become a kind of broker for people of all faiths. Now, actually, I think that's a valuable and a positive way forward, possibly. It may be the only way forward the Church of England's got left.
Do you believe in the virgin birth, Christina?
I do. I believe in miracles, too. And,
do you have to believe in the virgin birth and the resurrection of Christ to be a Christian?
And the whole thing is that, you see, what is so interesting is that what Richard and his fellow secularists want is for science to be the only guiding force.
Well, a lot of religious people are secularists.
Well,
you know.
and for rationality and reason to be our God. But actually, what spirituality is a whole other dimension that we enter into, and that you don't.
I don't care what you believe and what you say.
You care a great deal because you keep polling us. You keep polling us, and you keep trying to play a numbers game. And if we're going to play a numbers game, 7,000 members of the National Secular Society is just about as much as
Christina,
the
please
7,000 members of the National British Sausage Appreciation Society.
We all know that this is political.
Let's not let
Okay, wait.
drive
Jonathan, Richard, remind Richard what he was going to say.
I was just interrupted. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was the point. What was the point you were making? It was the point before that about.
I'm saying that it's not
appreciating.
I don't care what you believe, so long as what you believe is not used to legislate in this country and affect what the rest of us believe. Why do we have 26 places in Parliament reserved for bishops of the Church of England? Why not?
Wait, let him finish.
Could I finish?
Let him finish.
Why not have 26 places reserved for white men?
This is an answer.
If you did that, there would be outrage, and quite rightly. Why do we have 26 places reserved for bishops of the Church of England?
What do you think about this? Well, I don't know about the virgin birth or not. Do you think that's key to being a Christian? Do you think all those sort of fundamental key...
It's up to them. If they want to believe supernatural nonsense, that is up to them, but don't force it on the rest of us.
Okay. What about you, Dr. Katmi? Dr. Katmi, do you think this is a Christian country?
Now, let me give you a Muslim perspective on what you ask.
Right.
I have been working for the last 30 years with hundreds of Christian organizations, pro-life, family, morality, chastity, marriage, etc.
Actually, that's not what the research shows at all. It doesn't show that people live their lives as if Christianity is the cultural wallpaper. It shows quite the opposite. It shows that although they tick Christian as a sort of cultural box, and the most commonly given reason in the survey was because their parents were religious or because they were Christians, so it's a sort of heritage attachment. Actually, Christianity forms very little
confounded Richard Dawkins was that he thought we were textbook Christians, that we knew which was the first book in the Bible. We knew what the first 5 books of the Old Testament were called. No, that's not the kind of Christians we are. We are everyday Christians. It informs our every life. And it means that we do believe in charity, and we do believe in helping others, and we do believe in turning the other cheek much, much more than if we were a totally secularist culture.
Richard?
I didn't think anything. I asked Ipsos Mori to find out. Research is not preconception.
Yeah, Andrew.
Our culture is definitely a Christian culture.
That's religious, Christina, but not necessarily Christian. Let's take,
that's part of our identity.
The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, the Lord God made them high and lowly, each to his estate, was an endorsement of medieval feudalism. It was an endorsement of, keeping inequality as it is.
But that's not
Christian, that's religious.
But that's not God-given. Yes, that was written by a Victorian lady, and it was an expression of her values.
It was an expression of religious values, but I would say not Christian values. And we need to make a huge distinction between the two, because the two are not the same.
But Jonathan, I think that, as I said, we have a culture that is Christian, and it comes in what completely